Pokémon is more than accustomed to criticism. Every generation, whether looked at glossfully in retrospect, has earned their fair share of criticism. But the last few generations and releases have seemed to attract an unforeseen amount of dissatisfaction, angst, and even queries of whether the mother company, Game Freak, should be shafted altogether and the franchise should be given to a more proven 3D developer. Questions of care, pressure, and management. But today I wanted to reflect on a time when Pokémon were able to lull this storm of noise and angst, and capture people's hearts and eyes as we were so accustomed to them doing. A time where, even if it was just for a moment, people were once again marveling at a Pokémon game. The start of Legends Arceus is unusual. I remember actually being quite startled by this cutscene, and the whole beginning throws you in a starkly different reality, which doesn't resemble any other main series game. You don't start off in a quaint hometown with 6 friends around the corner raring to help you. You are an unproven stranger literally lost in space and time, who has no identity or home to claim. And I think this unfamiliarity is what Legends thrives in. A good portion of the criticism for Sword and Shield was that it was the same old packed onto a newer system. But Legends Arceus kind of flips the script at the start of the game. Like I said, you're no longer in this safe grounded position, and I found myself instantly more engaged and invested because it was also different. I remember I actually spoke to every single NPC before I initiated the next part with Benny, which is a conversation I wanted to highlight because Benny immediately calls us suspicious and tells us to move on. And then we meet Silene, who offers to stay for the night, but we have to prove our worth, and if we don't, we will be expelled from the village where we may meet our death. Like, the presentation of Pokemon was so different in this day and age. It wasn't the usual briefing of how wonderful and mysterious the world of Pokemon is. The people of Hisui tell a different tale, a tale of violence and destruction. The gameplay is what I see as Legend's greatest success. This is opinion talking here, but I think it achieved the greatest balance in a Pokemon game, while still giving the ultimate freedom to the player. You can let me know which method of play you prefer between Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet. I'm aware Legends Arceus gameplay doesn't fit in the newer releases since Pokemon and people are living in harmony. I just think it's the better form of gameplay and is more enjoyable and versatile, and I'm willing to argue for it. For starters, there were countless amount of times in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet where you would just slam into a Pokemon, which thrusts you into a battle that impedes your exploration for at least 10 seconds, which can get super annoying when the Pokemon are hard to see, like the draw distance can be pretty short, or you just simply can't run away. Whereas in Legends, the player has full control whether they initiate battle or not. If you don't, you'll often get punished, which is where the balance comes in. Having a health means you will have to engage in battles at times, but these fights will have much higher stakes because, for example, if an alpha demolishes your mon, you're likely going to get pounced upon, and lose not only your lunch money, and dignity, but items that just can't be retrieved unless someone else in the world does the dirty work for you. And the money situation is actually surprisingly tight in Legends Arceus. I mean, I guess I did invest in Rotom corporations. And let's not forget, in Legends Arceus, if you do rile up a Pokemon, they're likely gonna bring up their buddies too, and it made for some pretty intense 1v3 battles. It's not as relevant now because you can openly fight over-leveled Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, but I still remember early game watching playthroughs and stuff. Alphas were legitimately scary, like people wouldn't mess with Lafai Horse, and they were on such a grand display just in terms of size of each Pokemon. And the battle system meant that if you did engage in battle, like they would get straight into their work, destroying your team the second you would enter battle. But this meant when your team was able to finally rally together and have a victory, it felt so much more rewarding taking down this huge giant. And the Pokeball thing was just so much more intuitive and interactive, and just snappier. Like, would you rather take down a whole horde like this, where you can't even catch them all, so you don't know which one has a hidden ability or what's the best? Or this, where you have to enter 5 separate battles? Or like this, where you can just catch them all in 15 seconds and assess which ones you want to keep later. And it wasn't completely unbalanced. Jet Balls did go pretty ham, but there's a chance you miss or they break out and try and attack you. Or the balls get hit by a rock, or they just don't work. Matter of fact, what is going on here? I guess even I have to admit, Legends Arceus isn't perfect, and there are some apparent issues. They seem pretty minor when you put them up against Scarlet and Violet's performance issue, but some of the textures and frame rate of Pokemon from a distance can look pretty rough. You doing alright there, Gyarados? Gyarados? And there's just the fact that you just might not enjoy Legends Arceus' gameplay loop, and much prefer the strategy elements and trainer battles in previous Pokemon games. I honestly didn't mind having this almost exclusive single player adventure. It felt kind of cool being the lone traveler in this rugged world, and I didn't really miss trainer battles that much, contrary to a lot of people, and their return in Scarlet and Violet was pretty pitiful anyway. I'm talking about the pass-by trainers, not like the gyms and stuff. In Scarlet and Violet, those battles were awesome. But yeah, the issues really didn't hinder my enjoyment at all, and I actually somewhat like the art style of Legends Arceus, and think the 3D Pokemon models are pretty impressive. But hey, that's just me. Finally, I wanted to mention 3 things that are relevant in retrospect at that time, but not really since Scarlet and Violet has mostly continued down Legends trend with these things. The first is the alphas. I do remember after Sword and Shield, there were lots of complaints about how linear and incremental level increase in wild Pokemon was, and apparently it was just a breeze. But with alphas and the open world, there are just many more challenges along the way. They're almost like mini totem battles with their stat increases. I also wanted to mention hand-holding, because that had been such a big dreadful issue for so many people in recent generations. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if people were still pissed about the hand-holding in Sun and Moon. And in Legends Arceus, there still was a lot of dialogue, especially in the first hour or two. But once you're free. There's no Tauros blocking the way or Rotom explaining what a tree is. It's just you and the Pokemon in a free-to-roam world. The last thing that I wanted to mention is just the fact that the focus was on completing the Pokédex and catching them all, which has been a staple phrase in this series, but rarely is the feat actually followed through, and it was just refreshing for this to be the focus and be legitimately rewarded by the true ending of the game. And it was especially encouraging to complete the decks when you saw the impacts on the town. In most Pokemon games, you pass by cities to complete your mission, and the people inhabit the region are only really the backdrop. In Legends Arceus, it changes that sentiment, as the village folk are central to the development of Hisui and your story. I mentioned just how petrified people were of Pokemon, but there was still this curiosity among the citizens. While they might not want to actually touch or have any relationship with Pokemon, they were still very fascinated by these creatures. So it was cool to see how by completing the missions and the research tasks, you were able to fulfill that curiosity and change people's perspectives on Pokemon. You were slowly proving that a future with Pokemon was possible, and that Hisui is a viable place to live. It felt more significant of a goal than just a sole goal of becoming a champion, and it was cool to see a journey that didn't just revolve around you. And if you venture back to the village after completing the story, you'll notice that your impact was felt, as there are people introducing Pokemon into their homes, and they have plans to expand and build new villages. The people are also very understanding that the only way to move forward is to live in harmony with Pokemon. Heck, even the Diamond and Pearl clans were thankful for you, and were pondering about how neither of their almighty sinner was right. It may seem like a small detail, but I genuinely found it refreshing going around the village and speaking to everyone, and realizing that these characters' perspectives had changed, that they weren't just rigid text boxes. Legends also introduced the side quests, which were a good way to expand on the citizens we see, and a good way to break up the main story. Whether it was Tao Hu and choice beef, or Wanda taking a step outside and instantly getting lost, these side quests were very enjoyable and charming, except for these pesky Bidoos, of course. Like, where were these Bidoos? It literally took me like 25 minutes to find that last Bidoof. Now you'll find them chilling at the top of this roof. The story took a while to really form, as the initial parts of the game were really about quelling the noble Pokemon. But boy, when the story did heat up, for me personally it was like top 10, no, like top 3 climaxes of a Pokemon game. It was an emotional roller coaster, from being banished from the village by Commander Kamado, to meeting Koghita, Benny's transformation into a ninja, Kamado's battle and his surrender, and then facing off against Dialga or Palkia using the opposing legendary, and then facing off against Volo in the ultimate betrayal. Like, there were so many memorable moments and turning points, and it accumulated to be such a cool build-up. The music accompanied the story so well too. The Red Sky theme was chilling and eerie, even just by listening to it on its own, without the context of the red sky. You can tell there's something wrong, unnatural going on. Koghita's theme is one of my favorite Pokemon tracks ever. A few comments from the music video sum it up really well. It was that respite and sanctuary in the midst of the storm. I've heard a few people say how Legends Arceus will be a game that we'll be nostalgic about, and this is definitely the part of the game that I'll reflect on the most, the Red Sky chapter. I must admit, I was expecting the story to have a much bigger emphasis on Arceus, as prior to Legends there was so little information about arguably the most important and most fascinating Pokemon. We've got a movie, Jewel of Life, which shows us a bit of his past and his frustrations and distrust with humans, but that's about it. A story revolved around Arceus was a big reason why I was so interested and ended up buying the game. But Arceus still remains as mysterious as before. Even the reasoning for why we were brought here is very unclear, since there is no use in seeking out all of the Pokemon to the literal creator of Pokemon. And there's still so many mysteries that remain in Hisui. I'm planning to cover all of the mysteries in a separate video, so if you're interested in helping me work out some of the remaining mysteries, you could subscribe or come back to the channel tomorrow. I think most of us were expecting some sort of DLC, which would have answered some of the questions, or another idea is they could have delayed BDSP releases and used those games as a platform to delve into more of Sinnoh's past. I think that would have been a good point of difference, as BDSP really made little attempt to improve upon the originals, as many of its previous remakes did. But yeah, I guess there wasn't enough time for the DLC because they released Gen 9 too quickly, and that was rightfully their priority. For a split second in the aftermath scene with Mai, Irida, and Adaman, I thought we were going to be able to build like the first gym in Hisui and take on a bunch of emerging trainers, but no, my dreams were a little bit too lofty. But I'm just so glad that my expectations of Legends Arceus were so greatly exceeded. I still vividly remember in the car on the way back after getting the game, like I kept thinking and saying, like, I just really want this game to be good. Like I wouldn't have minded if they had delayed it. I guess thinking about it, I didn't really have any expectations since I hadn't bought a Pokemon game for a while, and there was just so much mystique and mystery surrounding this game. Like they revealed so little about the game in the lead up trailers and news. Like if you didn't look at leaks, all we really knew was that we were going to Old Sinnoh and there were going to be two clans at war with each other, and Arceus was going to be involved in some form. The mystique made the experience all the more special. Discovering everything for the first time goes back to like when we were playing Pokemon as kids, where we weren't keeping up with the news or the trailers. We had very little knowledge of the world or what was going to happen next. But yeah, that's my review, reflection, retrospective, whatever you call it, of Legends Arceus. I've been wanting to make this video for a while now. I started writing it in like June, maybe even earlier than that, and I missed the opportunity before Scarlet and Violet. I didn't quite finish the video, so I'm very relieved that I finished it and got it out on its 1-year anniversary. The game was truly a joy to play. It rejuvenated my interest in Pokemon, brought me back up onto this sinking ship. No, I'm joking. But it did come at a pretty important time in my life when I really needed to be reunited with an old friend like Pokemon. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And if you're interested, check out the rest of the series, which will release throughout January. And have a good day.